Good afternoon, everyone. Warm welcome to Airport Show Insights, the first in our series of webinars that we're hosting as part of Airport Show. Uh, these webinars will run till September, so we hope you are able to join as many of these as you can. They're CPD certified, so you get some points for the training and the knowledge and the information you receive. My name is Daniel Qureshi. I'm a group exhibition director at Reed Exhibitions in the Middle East, the organizers of Airport Show. Airport Show takes place in October, end of October. We hope a lot of you will join. A lot of you international attendees will visit us and be at the show. Now, thank you all for joining today. To the panelists, of course, and to our attendees. I would like to run through a quick presentation just to set the context of what we'll be discussing today and why we're discussing what we are discussing today. So if you just bear with me for a second, I will share my screen. The topic of our discussions today is preparing your ground support equipment for post-COVID operations. As we've seen, the impact of air travel globally has been profound. We've seen traffic drop to levels unprecedented in the history of aviation. We all hope we never have to see something like this again. But what's happened, especially in the last 3-4 months, has been an exercise in learning for all of us because we've never experienced something like this before. COVID-19 was declared a pandemic on the 11th of March, and the global traffic started dropping in January. February was worse, March even worse, and I think we hit rock bottom in April with slight recovery in May and slightly better in June. You'll see at the top of this graph, you'll see a dotted line. This was the originally planned seat capacity. So if you look at the difference between what was originally planned and what did really happen, it's quite scary. Now, the decline was 14% in February, 56% in March, 94% in April, and 91% in May. Overall, the impact was expected to have a 50% decline in passenger numbers across 2020 compared to our baseline projections for the year. The highest number of decline that we will see expected to see is in Europe, 57%, followed by Asia Pacific, 53%, and then Middle East and Africa, both around 47%. These are indeed, very disappointing numbers. Now, we are seeing some recovery gradually. We will see this recovery according to ICAO, IATA, and ACI. We will see this recovery in domestic markets, followed by regional and international markets. Domestic markets, of course, with national policies for health and safety, for quarantine, etc. It's easier to restore travel in domestic markets. Regional markets, EU, Middle East, will see gradual recovery, and of course, international traffic, we hope, will go up over the next couple of months as we see the quarantine rules being lifted in across the world and air traffic being restored. If this is any sign, the first 22 days of June, traffic reached minus 80% below 2019 levels. So from the 94% decline in April, 91% decline in May, minus 80% in June is a positive sign. Now, in the region, in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, and the UAE, Emirates has resumed services to over 50 destinations, Fly Dubai to 17 cities. All 4 airlines in the UAE, Air Arabia, Fly Dubai, Emirates, and Etihad, all have resumed their flights and are helping residents and international tourists come into the country. Dubai will start welcoming international tourists from today, so we're all very happy. I hope a lot of our international participants today will see you over the coming months. We'll see you in Dubai to enjoy our city. Other positive signs. Wizz Air flew from Budapest to Abu Dhabi on the 1st of July. Air Arabia starts flying from the 14th of July from Abu Dhabi to Egypt. Even with what has happened, the fact that flights are restarting. New airlines are restarting. In fact, in the UAE, is a sign that there is a positive sentiment within the market, and we hope that there will be a gradual recovery of passenger numbers. So as the passenger numbers increase and a lot of the ground support equipment is brought back into use, what is the role of ground handlers in ensuring health and safety? That is the focus of our webinar today. So they're responsible for safely moving aircraft, parking, taxiing. They're responsible for safety on the ramp, for equipment and personnel, boarding, deplaning, and handling cargo, which has actually gone up in certain markets during this period, and of course, reducing the risk of contamination. Ground handlers play a critical role in ensuring confidence levels are restored in flying. If airports and airlines put in place measures to bring back traffic, ground handlers are part of the wider ecosystem that will ensure that this is done safely. So, what will we cover in this webinar? So we will look at new safety and hygiene measures recommended for GSE equipment, ground support staff. We will look at top tips to keep your equipment maintained while parked and in the slow post-COVID recovery period. We'll look at some recommended restart checklists from perspectives of IATA, ICAO, and OEMs. We will look at how are GSE manufacturers supporting their clients during the pandemic, and what are the innovative solutions and new products that we will see in ground handling in the future. We have a very experienced panel of speakers today. They bring dozens of years of experience and case studies that will help us follow best practice while restarting our ground handling operations. This includes two leading OEMs, JBT, ITW, a world leader in tracking and visibility solutions, Track IT, and France-based expert aviation consultancy, Air Business Consultants. I hope you enjoyed this session. Please do post your questions in the Q&A window to the right of your screen, and we will try to get to as many of these during the webinar as we can. We want to start our discussions today with Mr. Hervé Guesquin. He is the owner and CEO of Air Business Consultants in France. Hervé brings more than 30 years of experience in the airline business across airlines and GHAs such as Air UK, KLM, Northwest, and Air France. He is a lecturer at INAC, the French Civil Aviation University in Toulouse, and a registered IATA external instructor. He is also an ISEGO auditor and regularly speaks at ground handling conferences around the world. I hope you enjoy his presentation and the rest of our speakers. Before we start, I'll request all our panelists once again to mute their mics. And over to you, Hervé.
Thank you, Daniel. I hope you can hear me sounding clear. So thank you for attending this webinar. We'll try to cover some main points that you may have in mind, especially in this time of distress. So let me share my screen now. So ABC, as mentioned by Daniel, we cover 4 main areas. We do audits, we prepare for ISEGO, we do consultancy, mainly lean management, choice on GSC, and also we are there to help you to write your own manuals. We have a training school with more than ground services, more than 100 ground services courses in different locations in Paris and in Africa. We do also GSC commissioning. And on GSC, of course, we have our own stock. We purchase, we sell, we maintain, we refurbish. That's our main activities. So let's talk about IATA and ICAO recommendation, because out of this storm, everybody was trying to survive. So you need some kind of lighthouses that help you to go through the storm. So that's why IATA and ICAO made some strong recommendation, even to the governments. Now, they call this extenuating circumstances. That's a defined expression. So then you have to define which category you fall in. Are you under COVID? Are you still operating? Are you limited? Or you have no operations? And that's where you have to find where you stand, and also to do some assessment on your next step. When it comes to ICAO, they posted quite some advices and operational measures. They develop a recovery platform that you can go on and check what they are counseling on. And therefore, you can find out some documentation. These documentation that you find on the left of the screen, it's the handbook for civil aviation on the management of aviation safety risk. So number one, they talk to the civil aviation because they're ICAO. Then IATA comes in a picture. For those who are IZEGO or non-IZEGO, they can also apply this guidance, and they came out recently, as you see, 2 months ago, on edition 1 of the guidance to return services, because, for example, in Europe, we are back into business for quite a while now. And finally, EASA, which is the European Safety Aviation Agency, also gave some guidelines. So we're not talking about really guidelines here. We're talking about applying what they're telling us. So these are documentation that you can find online, which we'll be happy to share. Now you're at the bridge or you're restarting your operation. So what do you have in consideration? Well, IATA and ICAO are calling this the takeoff guidance. So as we say, these guidelines were given, and now they want to help you and also to press on your government and civil aviation to follow these guidelines, because most of the time the civil aviation is kind of reluctant or is taking a long time before taking a decision. So you have to help them also, because you are the business and you want to go back on the business rapidly. What do you have to do? Well, number one, because you're IZEGO or you're not IZEGO, you have to make a risk assessment. Don't forget, you still have the SMS and the CA still have this oversight. So you need to identify gaps. You need to task prioritize your whatever you want to do. Of course, you're going to find out what is left for you. So you're going to focus on resource planning. So human resources, ground support equipment resources, and you have to find also the adequate resources and plan adequately. Then check on your personnel. Are they still competent? Are they still trained? Are they still recurrent? Is their airport access still valid? What about the scheduling? Where are they? Maybe you lay them off, so you have to recover them. And also, we will talk later on with the OEM on GAC. What's the situation with my GAC? Then you base your readiness on this checklist given by IATA, for example, and you evaluate, you identify gaps. You do, again, a risk assessment, even if it's a small one, but you have to do one. Now, this is an extract from the IATA ramp readiness checklist. So I'm not going to go through everything, but number one, you need to find out what about the stationary and your protective personal equipment? Are they still there? Don't forget, safety is still your concern. Then, okay, the GSE, is it serviceable? Can be used by these competent qualified people? Then we'll focus now on the checklist for the GSE. That's another checklist given by IATA. So one, you sit and you develop a GSE return to service plan. You have a full performance on safety and functional checklist, and you use the equipment pre-operational checklist or any similar document that's being given by the manufacturer. And that's when the manufacturer come in, because they're going to tell you what exactly you need to do on this equipment. That is all for me. Now I can pass the ball to Daniel back, I think.
Thank you, Hervé. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions. One, what are the three main points that you would suggest that any ground handler to check before resuming ramp operations?
Well, as I mentioned in my presentation, that I'm sure you're going to share with everybody. Number one, you have to do a safety risk assessment. Okay, you have to cope with this, and you have to check what are the risks now that you are entering into a specific, maybe way to handle things, like putting cargo on board an aircraft in the cabin. What risk do I have? Am I okay with the civil aviation? All these things. Then what do I have? What kind of equipment do I have? Is it running? And then finally, I have to find out if my people are still competent and can they access the airport? Very simple things, but at least you have to do them.
One more question before we move to our next speaker. Um, Regarding GSC in particular, are there any necessary checks that we need to perform before starting the engine if it's been parked for a long time?
Well, I would think that the OEMs will be best to speak about it, but at least to find out if where are they parked or they're still running. And the problem is in storage. Have they been in a hangar or have they been outside? Or you in a corrosive air environment? So maybe you have to check things that on cleanliness of the GSE to start with, the electricity, the batteries are still good. Just little things before you start the engine.
Okay.
And
perfect.
one thing, if I can add, Daniel,
Sure.
a couple of because there's no activity, birds and wildlife take over. So we find a couple of nests either in the aircraft main gear or in some equipment, nicely nested. So we have to take care of this also.
Make sure that's taken care of. Okay, thank you, Hervé. We'll come back to you with some more questions at the end of this. Our next speaker today is Miss Lami Salkati. She's the area sales manager for the GCC and Levant at JBT Aerotech. As a leading global GSE provider for both the civil and military industries, JBT has been at the cutting edge of new technology and customer satisfaction for its clients. Lamis is a highly experienced sales professional who has worked with a number of global heavy equipment manufacturers and cargo solution providers, helping clients across terminal operations and ground and cargo handling in the aviation and maritime industries. Thank you for joining us today, Lamis, and over to you.
Hello, everyone, and hello, Daniel. My name is Lamis Al-Kaati from JBT, John Bean Technologies. Thank you for joining the webinar, and I hope you will benefit today from a JBT ramp-up checklist. I'd like to share my presentation, and we can go over it as well. Okay, so surely we have seen lots of changes because of the unprecedented circumstances in the aviation industry. We have seen reduction, as you mentioned, up to 94% of aircraft activity, as well as we've seen a strong air cargo demand for personal equipment, personal protective equipment, medical and food supplies, pharmaceutical as well. We've seen as well a great drop in the belly cargo capacity, and that is due to grounding of all aircraft passenger. So all this has left the airlines and the ground handlers to look into solutions to save, for example, to preserve their GSE, store it, as well as to support the cargo demand. So some of them started carrying some modification on their passenger aircraft to allow to load on the passenger seats some cargo. As well, we have they have to think about implementing safety requirements at the ramp, adhering to safety restrictions. We, as JBT, a leading manufacturer of the whole line of ground support equipment, we have been as well working together with the industry, and we have standing towards our commitment. So our equipment were hard at work, and still, such as the JBT cargo loaders, we have as well ensured the continuity of customer care and support for the service in this critical situation. As well, we came up with some innovations such as JBT Shoot to help the passenger aircraft As well, our product expertise within our company been discussing with our customers as well as with IATA, and putting the guidelines to preserve the GSE and when to bring it and how to bring it back to and what is the checklist required to bring it back into operation. So as you can see, we are not really in a post-COVID time. Still, we are in a transitional phase, because you would see the level of activity now within Asia is different within the Middle East and different from Europe and so on. So you have to put a plan, and you might think that, okay, if you have stored 80%, you might be now ready to get out only 20%. Since all of this been going on very fast, and the ground handlers and airlines had to take some quick actions, so I'm thinking that perhaps some of you might benefit if we go over the checklist, a quick tips and checklist of storage as well, because it is really the basis of ramping up quickly. So we've seen in the industry two types of storage. You have the short-term storage, which starts from 1 month up to 4 months, and that is about rotating the equipment every 3 weeks and continuous and periodic check. And you have the long-term storage. Now, in both cases, it is very important that you follow a certain checklist. First of all, you have to put a plan and think about all the equipment you have, which ones you're going to scrap, and which one you are going to and which one you're going to refurbish, and some of them you will repair. Safety is very important, so you have to chock the wheels and ensure they don't move in any direction, and that will help you as well not to seize the parking brake. As well, inflate the tires at the pressure per the specification manual. Looking at the fuel, you have to ensure, if it's a short-term storage, ensure that you top up the fuel, and if it's a long-term, then add some stabilizer to which will help you check all the fuel levels. And then greasing, ensure to lubricate all the greasing points so there is no any dirt that will sit within, will get into these points, and like that you will save the equipment from any corrosion. If you find any exposed surfaces that would require some touching up, that would be great as well if you do that, to save your equipment again from corrosion. And then I would think about as well, you have to run a lot of preventive maintenance checks and run a lot of periodic check, the normal maintenance check that you would conduct. So if you've done all of these points, that is very good, and you would be ready to the next step of post-COVID. I would as well think about the batteries. You have the electric equipment, and even you have batteries within the diesel equipment. As you might know, Danielle, that both equipment, both ways, you're going to follow the same instructions, but it is very important that you disconnect your battery, because it will still draw the power, and ensure that you store it in a dry place, and continue to charge it within the minimal level. For example, you have the lead acid up to 80%, then you have the lithium up to 90%, and with lithium you don't have maintenance. So like that you are coming back to less damage, and it will be very quickly that you will ramp up. The which is the main focus of this webinar, is to see what is the checklist for bringing it back to operation. Very important that you go and check your equipment manufacturer manual and go towards the pre-operational check, which is recommissioning after a long term of inactivity. So generally you will start with a quick walk around for check of any damage or leak or corrosion. You check your tires if there is any dry, rot or cracks, as well as check a hydraulic check, replenish or refill your fuels, your fluids, such as the fuel, the coolant, even the oils as well. Check the level of your the pressure in your tires as well, and set it right, depend on your specification manual. With regards batteries, ensure that you fully charge your battery, and do not rely to start the engine to charge your battery by the alternator. So fully charge it and then install it within your machine, back in your machine. Also, it is advised that you carry some load testing away from your aircraft, and that is to check the parking, the brake system, as well as for you, you have to check as well the procedure for this emergency stops. Then you switch off your machine, you have another walk around and you check for any leaks. Also run the maintenance, preventive maintenance, as well as the daily maintenance. These are really the tips for what to do. It's really a very long, intensive checklist. You got to go back to your operational manual. Now, yeah, like in terms of the ramp, what we can see that it is very important to bring back confidence to your team, as well adhere with safety requirements in the ramp. So it is the usual temperature check. Remind your team about hand wash and sanitize, proper hand wash, mask glove 2 meters apart, and then implement some innovations available in the market, such as like in a driver cap in a tractor. It is very important to install a perspex screen because you can't keep 2 meters apart between the driver and the second passenger. Then you might think as well to cover the driver wheel, the seat with a cloth, like what they call, you can throw this cloth away, disposable cloth after each shift. And as well, you can install some innovations to provide you with faster loading from the passenger aircraft, such as the JBT chute, passenger chute. And then don't forget to sanitize your equipment and have a team to manage this operation using the fogging techniques, as well as you can have the handheld techniques. This is just a quick picture of JBT chute. As you can see, there is nothing wrong in unloading from the passenger main aircraft door. However, the airlines that shows you they had to find a solution. But today we are talking to them about the JBT slide or chute, and it is really something to prevent injury and reduce labor strain, and also it's a faster unloading. This is what I can see, Dania. So
thank you, Lamis. That was great. Quick question: how are you supporting your clients in the region since the start of the COVID pandemic? How have you been supporting, particularly as JBT as an OEM? How have you been supporting your regional clients in the Middle East?
Yeah, well, we've been committed to the industry. As you've seen, we've brought in the innovation of JBT chute. We as well have enrolled all our customer workshop team, maintenance team, and technicians on a JBT. It's a free initiative, JBT University, where you find all the modules for different products, very beneficial. We as well enrolled them in live, in very thorough, intensive maintenance and operational training with our senior service engineers. And this is going on twice a week as well, which is great. And also we have introduced the rental programs for some of the available stock in our plants for the customer. As you know that there is some financial restrictions on budgets, so that's why sometimes, like, to support them in a certain application or addition to their fleet, and they don't have the they have like limited budget, so like that they can benefit from this program. And of course, don't forget the customer care, been also supporting with continuous parts and service to ensure the continuity of the operation.
Okay, thank you, Ramis. Virtual training and JBT University and rental programs, some of these sound quite exciting. I'm sure a lot of our attendees will want to get in touch with you. Just a reminder to everyone that we are facilitating matchmaking with our panelists post-webinar. So if you want to get in touch with any of our panelists after, please mention it in the post-webinar survey, and we will assist you with that.
Yeah, Daniel, I want to add, please, regarding the checklist, the engine, it is very important that your fuel system is full and ensure that all the lines have fuel, because you want to avoid any moisture intrusion. As well, if you have a DEF system within your engine, drain the DEF system fully, and that if your equipment been standing idle for over 4 months. And make sure to check your hydraulic pump as well. And it is suggested that you run some fuel testing and sampling, the hydraulic fuel and return filter.
Sure. We've
And
actually had.
if anyone want to get to JBT ramp checklist, get in touch with us or with any account manager around the globe for JBT
Sure,
as well.
sure. We've had some questions around fuel, lubricants, etc., and we'll come to these at the end of all the presentations. So thank you, Lamis. Now we'll having heard from Hervé and Lamis, it's obvious that we need to have the best solutions on hand as we restart our GSE operations. We're going to move on to our next speaker, where we will look at how digitalization and IT solutions can provide an effective tool to meet these requirements during and post-recovery. Our next speaker, Mr. Vijay Nair, is a Senior Manager of Digital Solutions at Track IT and is based out of the UAE. Like Hervé, Vijay also brings over 30 years of experience to this discussion, including more than 20 of these in airport ground handling operations with Donata. Thank you for joining us today, Vijay, and over to you.
For the introduction, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the participants in different parts of the world. Good to see that there's such a good crowd. And thank you, Hervé and Lamis, for a very engaging discussion. So moving on from what Daniel just mentioned, operational benefits. So Track IT focuses basically on visibility and tracking solutions, and primarily in the aviation industry. And one of the things that we do is, of course, tracking GSE. We have a fleet management solution. And the operational benefits, as Daniel mentioned, some of the tangible benefits that you get out of these include, reduction in operating costs, reduction in the fuel consumption, GSE availability, the increases, the planned maintenance hours goes down, which means you're more productive. And most important, the greenhouse gas emissions reductions. These also can be facilitated by these systems, and optimization of the engine hours per flight. A lot of intangible benefits also do come in. I won't go through that because definitely you would know it. Accurate revenue capture of ad hoc services, enforcing the safety policy using access control, etc. But then today's discussion is primarily on where we are today and how the whole pandemic situation has actually affected every one of us, including obviously the aviation industry and all the associated industries within that. Now, we hear the term new normal, but how does it apply to GSE? We all know that the current, even before the pandemic, the safety standards in the aviation industry were very, very stringent and very important. In my view, what's going to happen is that the passenger and staff who work within the airport, within the aviation field, are not exposed to these potential health threats will become equally important. So ground handling companies, any organization connected with the aviation field will have to ensure these things, that the passenger and staff are not exposed to these potential health threats. Now, technology will play a big hand. And what will happen is it cannot be an interim solution. It will have to be permanent solutions which are driven by technology that would need to be adopted to ensure that there is a safe environment for everybody, for the passengers and the staff. Now, we've all heard these terms. Both Lamis as well as Hervé mentioned the disinfection program. We heard Lamis mention about the serviceable condition. Contact tracing is a term that we have all heard these days, and equalizing the GSE workload, which in a way is the rotation aspect that Lamis mentioned. Now, how can technology and how can these GSE fleet management and tracking systems assist in these matters? That's some of the other things that I'm going to speak about. So how do you enforce a disinfection program? It has to be backed up by real-time data. It's very clear that many of these equipments which have direct or indirect contact with the passengers will definitely need stringent disinfection and sanitization regimes. That's going to just like the preventive maintenance schedules. Hello?
I think you forgot to share your screen.
Disinfection and sanitation regimes are going to be pretty critical for any GSE that is going to have a direct or indirect connection with the passenger. But how do you ensure that you comply to these regimes, which is also important from the audit perspective, from the ISAGO audits or the other audits that take place, and also to gain the customer confidence. You need to have real-time monitoring of the management system or GSE fleet tracking system. You can create geofenced areas where dedicated areas where these disinfection activities will be conducted. What you do is you monitor these zones coupled with the live tracking of the GSE, which will help and use those to report completion or non-completion of disinfection and sanitization. Use the business rule engines within these systems to schedule the next round of disinfection, which could be based either on time or on the number of flights that are handled. In these ways, and this is the way that real-time data can help you to enforce the disinfection program. Now, we also heard about GSE serviceability. Now, there are two strategies generally which will be adopted, as Lamis mentioned. One is long-term storage of GSE, and other one is grounding of the GSE equipment on the apron. Now, grounded GSE on the apron needs to be checked to ensure that all systems are in good working condition. Yes, you can have checklists, you can have people going around, but you have people shortage. There are a lot of variables in today's world. So what you need is a system that makes sure that these checks are carried out and also guides the maintenance team to the right area in the airport where these equipments are parked, because you'll have a whole lot of equipments. You can't go around searching for this. So where are these equipments? That is the kind of things that your system should be geared towards. These GSE fleet management systems will play the significant role to ensure that these checks are done and the GSE are ready to meet the operational requirements when the air travel resumes. Contact tracing. We all know how critical it is. When GSE are in operation, they're operated by different operators. When the GSE are grounded or in maintenance, again touched and inspected by different technicians. Now, God forbid, one of these people who touch it has turned out to be COVID positive. Obviously, the organization needs to go and do a complete contact tracing to find out whom they were in touch with to ensure that the pandemic doesn't spread much. Now, you could, of course, look into the logbooks on who has operated or maintained this equipment, but that's going to take time. Hence, your system should have access control systems which ensure that such records, who operated it, who maintained it, are readily available, and which could enable rapid contact tracing. This is another way GSE systems could come in picture. Rotation of equipment. Now, if you look at the sequence of events, there was long period. There would be a period of no operations in some places. All GSE is grounded and not used. Some cases the cargo flights restart. Hence, some relevant GSE are used. Then you start the repatriation flights and the passenger flight resumption, which sees a gradual increase in the GSE utilization. What is the consequence of this? You will find out that obviously, very practical perspective, certain equipments which are being used will continue to be used, while those are grounded will continue to be grounded. It becomes a practice. What this ultimately results in is that the equipments which are being used get overutilized, the ones which are not underutilized, but also having issues. Hence, it is important that the GSE should be rotated through the operational, ensuring an equalized workload. Now, again, this is where you can create business rules within your tracking system to have periodic, you can have a rule which says that the equipment should be rotated within X amount of days, where these equipments are parked, how many engine hours these equipments have done, after which it should be rotated. These are the ways you can consider to use the system for the workload balancing and the rotational aspect. You can have data at your fingertips, various information on the utilization, GSE activity, the preventive maintenance compliance reports, and all these dashboards start giving you key information which will help you to take the required action as you go forward. The last slide from me, just some features of the GSE of our system, the Interact GSE. I'll just leave it at that. And Daniel, that's more or less from me. I'm sorry for the glitch on the presentation.
No problem at all. Thank you, Vijay. That was very helpful. As we move towards more digital and IT solutions, I'm sure a lot of our attendees will be seeking these for their operations. A couple of quick questions. So, how do you see the involvement of new technologies for the GSE industry? How do you think COVID will make it more rapid? Will it slow it down? How do you see COVID and its impact on the adoption of technologies such as this?
Well, these technologies, the one that I spoke of, were already there, were being used, but people will find creative ways of using it. Generally, these systems were used for tracking, monitoring, but then you find out that you can create business rules which will help you to do various things using the same system. And that's one aspect of it. But also in the GSE, the question that, just going ahead with the question that you asked me, is that we already had autonomous equipment before that. Probably the autonomous equipment delivery and the development will be faster, and we could be moving into things like IoT-based equipment and having, let's say, connected GSE, which would then encompass all these systems in one, and everybody has a visibility of what's happening on the apron.
Okay, and Track IT, yourselves, how do you aid maintenance practices for ground handlers?
Oh, well, if you look at the slide, there are a couple of things that we do. The system, of course, measures the engine utilization, which allows scheduling the maintenance based on utilization rather than on calendar days, which is one of the best practices that needs to be followed. We also enable things like preventive maintenance compliance, which is again a very critical thing to know that the equipments have been serviced in time. That's the other aspect that comes out of it. We provide dashboards for monitoring SLAs, like the availability of equipment on the day of operations. As of now, we monitor the health of the equipment so that you don't need to depend upon the operator to call in a complaint. For example, a low oil pressure switch is triggered. The system will send a message to the maintenance team saying that there's an issue with the equipment at this location, which equipment, rather than waiting for this. So we facilitate the maintenance part of it in many, many different ways.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Vijay. I'm sure we'll come back to a few more questions for you in the Q&A section at the end. I will now move on to our next speaker. Thank you, Vijay. We've seen that with what's happening in COVID, all the companies around the world, aviation and non-aviation, of course, are in a recovery mode. There's a huge focus on savings, on Opex. It's mandatory and critical for business managers to look at that. Our next speaker, ITW, believes that going green and sustainability is the way forward. And by doing so, you can improve your Opex. We've had some Q&A questions related to sustainability and green GSE already. So for those of our attendees who asked that question, they'll be pleased to hear from Benjamin. So our next speaker is Benjamin Violet, who is the Area Sales Manager Middle East at ITW GSE. Benjamin has recently joined the firm and oversees several countries in the region for ITW. He has been in the Middle East for over 7 years and has been involved in key projects related to ITW's 7400 eGPU. I hope I said that correctly. This is the world's first fully electric ground power unit. Benjamin will actually share how sustainability would be a key component of your post-COVID operational strategy. Over to you, Benjamin. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for everyone to be attending the webinar, and thank you everyone at Read Exhibition for organizing this webinar and for the opportunity of participating as well. So as we discussed a bit earlier with the other panelists, and as we are moving toward the post-COVID-19 phase and companies are entering into recovery and the activities are starting back up again, every bit of saving is quite important. And that's why we will explain and we'll see during this presentation how you can improve your operational expenditure while working toward a greener future. A bit of information about ITW GSE. So ITW stands for Illinois Tool Works, which is our mother company. ITW is a global diversified manufacturer with more than 85 decentralized businesses in more than 56 countries. We're one of those decentralized businesses, and at ITW GSE, we've been around for quite some time now. Before 2018, you might have known us under different names such as AXA Power, Auchin, Obart, or even J&B. A bit more information. We have 2 factories, one in the US, one in Denmark, and several regional offices. We focus on different areas such as power, air, cables, and houses. So as you can see on the picture, you have the ground power unit, you have the preconditioned air, the PCA, as well as the 7400. So the 7400, which is going to be one of the focus today, is the first battery-powered GPU. It can power any type of aircraft and can save you a lot of OPEX. So there's been a transition from diesel to electric in the GSE market. So we're really happy to see that. For a few years now, the different company and industry players have brought forward different type of electric GSE. So now you have baggage tractors, you have belt loaders, pushback tractors, or even container cargo loaders. We want to be part of this green revolution, and that's why we developed the 7400 eGPU. So as I mentioned earlier, it can power any type of aircraft, and invite you to go to our website to check all the exciting options we have for this unit. So transitioning from diesel to electric brings a lot of advantages. So the first positive impact that you can think of will be, of course, on the environment. And the one that most of you maybe don't think of is the impact of your operational expenditure as well as the total cost of ownership. We're going to see now with a live business case how you can calculate those differences. So what I'm going to show you now, we're going to open a dashboard and do a live business case together. I will show you you can quickly calculate the operational expenditure and the total cost of ownership. So this business case and the dashboard that you will see is mostly focused on the 7400, but the data we are using are actually quite wide, and they can be used to any type of GSE available on the market. So let me open the business case. So, okay, so now that you're seeing a dashboard, everything you see on your left-hand side is related to diesel costs. Everything that you will see on the right-hand side is related to electricity cost. And in the middle, a graph will be moving, and this graph is representing the 10 years total cost of ownership. So the first cost that you see right now in the middle of the screen is the catalog price of the eGPU, the 7400. And in a lot of cases, in the battery-powered new type of technology, they can be seen as costly. And we're going to see together there's much more to it than just the initial investment. So now I'm going to input different values to update this graph. Bear in mind that the value I'm going to input are the one we use for Turkey, which is where we've done the last business case. So I'm going to start with inputting the electricity cost, which is 0.10. You have your catalog price for the eGPU. We're going to now input the maintenance cost. So the eGPU, and I'm sure it's the same case for most of the eGSC, they come without maintenance. I'm going to just put 200 euro for the sake of it, if we have visual checks or stuff like that. And we're going to move on slowly toward the diesel part of things. I'm going to input the regular catalog price of a diesel GPU on the market, which is around 45,000 euros. You see now the graph is starting to move a bit. I'm going to add the maintenance cost, which is quite a conservative value for a new unit, 1,000 euros. See, it's evolving again, and we're going to finalize with the diesel cost. And you will see that now you will have the final pictures, and you will see there's quite a big difference. So we're going to input 0.98, which was the diesel cost back when we did the case study. And there you have it. So you can see on the left-hand side, 440,000 euros is the cost of operating a diesel GPU on a period of 10 years. The eGPU on the other end will cost you around a bit less than 220,000 euros. So just by transitioning toward a greener type of energy, you can save up to 220,000 euros, which is almost 2,000 euros a month. So bear in mind that the value we checked and that we saw together, they can be applied to any type of GSE. So I mean, this transition might seem costly at the beginning, but then when you see the cost of the overall total cost of ownership, you see there's quite a big difference and quite a lot of savings to be done as well. If we move on toward the cumulative Opex, you can see that the diesel is slowly ramping up the whole way, while the operating cost for the eGPU stays quite the same. If we move on toward the total cost of ownership, you can see that in about 4 years, you start already saving money. And this is just before it's actually way before the warranty runs out. So now you saw a business case, you saw how easy it can be to transition and the savings you can make just by going green. So this is about the economical impact, and you saw the savings you can do by doing this transition. Now about another quite important impact, which is on the environment. So all the GSE equipment that you see around these aircraft are the ones that are used to do regular turnaround. So there is a CO2 footprint for every one of them, which are hidden. I will ask you to just reflect for 1 or 2 seconds and guess which one has the most emission, for example. So you might have not guessed it, but it's actually the diesel GPU, which is actually the only GSE that you connect from the beginning of the turnaround until the very end. Actually, just thinking of emission itself, just standing near all those diesel equipment and standing near to a diesel GPU for turnaround, for example, it has actually 3 times the impact of standing into a smoking room. So now imagine if we could replace all those GSE equipment from diesel to electric, the impact it could have in terms of savings as well as on the environment. And actually, it has been done a few months back. Dinata did the first fully green turnaround using zero emission GSE. And congratulations to them. And we're really happy to see it, the way things are moving forward. So in those few minutes we discussed together, you saw how you can transition, how easy it can be, and what could be the impact of it as well. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward if you have any question. Back to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Benjamin. Myself, I'm a big fan of more sustainable solutions in aviation. We sometimes get a bad rap for our emissions. So from airlines to airports to ground handlers, all of us need to do our part. Now, quick question: you mentioned there was a case. You did your case study based on Turkey. So is there a particular case study that you can quote as an example where you did the transition and it particularly benefited the airline or the ground handler?
Good question. Thank you very much. So the case study that you saw and the entry data I used are a case study that we did with Pegasus Airlines back in Turkey. As you probably know, they do their own ground handling, and we've been working with them for quite a few months now to do this transition from diesel GPU toward the electric GPU. So far, they're very happy about the result, about how easy it is to use the units, as well as the savings they can make and the impact on the environment as well.
Okay. One more question before I open the questions to all the other panelists. How much do you see full transition into electric GSE in the future?
We can see it once. So it's been quite a few years now that this transition has started, and it was more of a suggestion before. Some ground handlers, they were switching toward greener type of technology, but as we see, for example, most of the airports in the Middle East and in the world now are taking part into the airport carbon accreditation. And, you start with lower levels and you work your way up. And then you start making airport APU free and you move up. And, the higher you are in terms of levels, the more you need to act in terms of having a lower carbon footprint. And one of the things the airport have to do is to ask the brand handlers to move away from diesel technology and bring forward, electric GSE. So it might have been a suggestion before, but it might no longer be the case in the future. The good thing is we saw that it's not that difficult. You can make a lot of savings. And, now that we're entering the recovery phase, new investments will be coming in. And I think it's time for all the brand handlers to go green.
Good. Well, thank you. I hope that encourages a lot of our attendees to look at this option. Can I request all the panelists to please unmute your mics, and I'll try to go through some of the questions. We've had a lot of questions. I don't know how many we'll be able to go through, but I will start with some of the easier ones. Lamis, there's one particular question for you. Does JBT have any role in the oil and lubricants in the aviation field?
Well, we don't manufacture equipment relevant to fueling the aircraft. That's what you mean?
Yes.
Not very clear question. No, we don't manufacture that type of equipment.
Okay, but in terms of oil and lubricants usage for equipment, GSE equipment, is that an area where you can provide some advice to
Sure.
client?
If they can get back to me or send, you can share their information. I can discuss with our expertise and get back to you with some information relevant to how they want to use the lubricant or the oils within GSE equipment. Maybe this is
Towards restarting as well. Okay. Okay. Good. Question for Vijay. Do you see a start of autonomous ground control systems to combat the current situation by using technology in the future? So autonomous ground control systems. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah. See, autonomous equipment testing and trials were going on for quite some time, even before COVID. In fact, I've seen some good machines being tested out at Heathrow and some of the other airports. So that was always there. Now, going forward, yes, autonomous vehicles does take away some of the risks of contact and all those things. But it is a process that need to be evolved because infrastructure has to be put in, the condition of the road, the GSE roads, everything has to be there. So it's not something that can be done overnight. But yes, definitely the situation could very well see that much more investment into that kind of activities. And probably just like Benjamin said about the green electric GSE, it could be that investments will come into that direction rather than the traditional form of GSE. It's very much possible.
Okay, thank you. Hervé, I'd like you to attempt this question. Since GSE are used by many different personnel, but also serve many flights from many different locations, tracking people for the sake of COVID-19, will this be a challenge or enforce a change on operational and maintenance systems and plans? So anything that you've seen related to this?
Well, the tracking system is, you have the DJ talked about it. We usually share the same equipment with different flights. That's not a problem. On the same airport, it's called pooling. Many companies now pool. Either they use, for example, a leasing company, and they pool all the equipment. So yeah, we have a tracking system that can be provided, and therefore you can monitor who used it, when, and that was developed by Vijay. I think Vijay is the most relevant person to speak about it.
Vijay?
Yeah. I saw the question, in fact, on the question and answer thing. And yes, if you go by the manual process, if you go by the traditional way of having logbooks and all that, yeah, that's going to demand a change in process and making sure that, things are there in place. But as you go forward with technology being input and even with the equipment coming with electronic systems, you can have access control. Now that means you really don't need to change the process of operation or anything, but you need to make sure that whoever is operating the equipment is authorized operator, and that information is logged in real time and available at the click of a button. So you wouldn't really need process changes to demand that. Whether it's used for different flight, all that then gets covered within the same gambit.
Yeah. Thank you, Vijay. Lamis, a question for you. Do you supply a special COVID sanitation fogger? And how long does it take to clean an aircraft if you do?
Well, we have our company, they have a segment where they do provide a type of fogging system. We can as well communicate that information to them. But it is used in a certain type of, it's in a different industry. It's used in a different industry with JBT technology, JBT food tech. Okay. So we are looking in the future to see how we can shift that technology to the aviation industry. It is something on the table.
That you're looking at. Okay. Okay. I'm just going through the questions now. I don't know if anyone wants to attempt this. How often should the equipment be recharged, and how time consuming is this?
It's not time consuming. You have a built-in charger, and you can charge the unit under 4 hours. So it's mostly about the type of power that you have. And it's quite easy to do, during downtime, it's quite easy to recharge the unit.
Vijay, one more for you. Do you see a quick transition to IoT or autonomous vehicles? And how do you find the balance without causing disruption to the current system, but still ensuring ROI?
That's it's really quite a tough question to answer in a matter of 2-3 minutes, but let me try. Like again, going back to what I said before, autonomous vehicles were always there, always planned. It's coming on the roads now. So certain type of equipments, definitely certain type of GSC are suited for autonomy. You know, it could be the baggage tractors, the baggage carts, and some equipment may not be suited. So the way I feel autonomous equipments will evolve over a period of time, but IoT, let's not mix IoT and autonomous vehicles. IoT is more about having different sensors and different Internet of Things kind of devices on this equipment which can communicate and pass data. Now, therefore, I really think that the connected GSE, so you could have IoT devices on even current equipment, does not have to be autonomous, and they communicate, and you have a complete connected GSE world. Probably that could be evolving faster. And yes, cost, that's something which would vary from airport to airport, and the ROI would need to be calculated before you go ahead for such implementation. I really cannot comment on the ROI without knowing what is the application and which airport we are talking about.
I think we're nearing the end of our session, but just a few quick questions from Hervé. Any success stories you can share with us where you were able to return to service on Park GSC?
Yeah, we had a loader, FMC loader, actually parked outside for a couple of months, and that was during winter. In fact, which we couldn't start it. We checked everywhere, as the manufacturer also mentioned, and we found out that it was the pedal that was corroded. So we had to check the switch, clean it, and it went back to normal. So sometimes you don't, you have to think about what could attack your GAC in terms of an environment. If you're next to an ocean, if you're in a sand environment, a dust environment, and maybe it's not the pump, you know, or the big thing. It could be little things that that bothers the restart of your operation. And it took us some time to find out, but there was nothing, barely nothing at the end.
That's very interesting. And your clients in the region at the moment, how are you helping? I'm sure that you must be getting lots of questions for support, for restart, etc. Consultancy.
Yes. Well, basically, many people were put on post on different regions. We serve Middle East and Africa, and in fact, they all had the same problem. When we ship the equipment stayed on the boat and then stay at dock, and then when finally we had the personnel to move the things out, we brought it in the airport. But then, oh wow, we have a flight. Please, let's check everything. So that's why it's important to, before, in fact, we urgently need to check. We do that pre-assessment checklist. So in fact, we do this with aircraft maintenance also. We do mooring, which means that every week we have to start the engine just to make sure it runs. At least you get the GSC running for quite some time. So that's how we could help in the region. We stayed focused, although we had our own problems with staffing, of course, but at least we could maintain some kind of hotline. Especially,
so you're able to assist them even now, even though you're not traveling to the region, you're able to assist them remotely.
Exactly. Zoom is the best thing to do it, huh? You have them to video exactly what's the problem, and you can help them remotely.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hervé. One last question. I'm slightly mindful of time. One last question for Benjamin. How does your company see the recovery of the Middle East's air transport sector over the next 18 to 24 months?
Quite a good question. You know, I think it depends on the market you're looking at in the first place. If I'm thinking of the Middle East itself, for example, compared to, let's say, the US, we are a bit less, let's say, less in line with the airlines operation, where in the US it's most likely like this. In Middle East, the focus is more on airport infrastructure, you know, with greenfield project, with airport expansion, refurbishment, and so on. So, I mean, even though we had the crisis, you know, there are many opportunities, and we see in the region the activity starting up again. We see the airports opening up again. So, I mean, if we look at, you know, the prediction, they say 2023 for back to full operation, but maybe we can hope for the best and for it to recover more nicely, I would say.
Very good. That's very positive. Thank you, Benjamin. Lamis and Vijay, Lamis, would you like to give your how do you see the recovery of the Middle East market over the next 18 months, 24 months?
If you compare like the Middle East, it's many countries on a small plot of land, and each of them might have a different restriction, different guidelines. And if you compare it, for example, to Europe, they were able to sit around the table and discuss what is to agree on one scheme when they receive passengers and receive aircraft and all that. Whereas here still it is not clear. The same like in Asia, they have having the same challenges. So once the GCC region, I would say, start with the GCC, they agree on opening their borders together, then we will see activities. And as you know, our region, like we have like Expo 2020 is postponed to 2021. So we are really like thinking that this is going to bring back a lot of activity, and we're hoping for that. And the same, we have many other things like the pilgrimage and all these activities. So we are looking into recovery within, I'd say, October 2021, starting with the expo or around March time, like that, in a year from now. But we have to say that we do have a very high demand in the cargo operation in our region as well. And sometimes the aircraft, we have like more than 3 shifts, like almost 3 shifts compared to other regions. So there is a lot of high demand of cargo. Cargo still been going. The military as well, expansions and requirements still going on. Airport expansions, military requirements. So this have slightly slowed down, but wasn't very affected, unlike the commercial side of the GSE.
Yeah, well, I can see Benjamin nodding his head as well. So I'm glad the OEMs are agreed on this. Vijay,
on the same page.
Are on the same page. Vijay, your predictions for the next 18 to 24 months?
I think I'll just use 2 words, you know, slow and steady. That's what we will be seeing. We already see Emirates going to 50, like you put up a flight starting from Abu Dhabi. So it will be a slow, and it won't be the rapid thing that we saw in the past. But yes, to stand with what they said by about October, the next expo, we should be able to see things happening in Dubai. But more than that, I think your show coming up in October, that might answer a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Vijay, for that promotional plug. we don't usually get panelists doing that, but ladies and gentlemen, I think to all our panelists and attendees, I think we have to wrap it up now. We're 12 minutes over the 1 hour we had planned for this. We have a lot of questions. We have so many unanswered questions which the panelists can see. What we will do is we will take these questions and share these with the panelists. So that they can answer them individually. We will send out a survey to everyone. Please answer the survey. There's an option in the survey to request meetings. I know a lot of you are looking at the solutions that are presented by the panelists. So please use the survey to get your certificates and to connect with our panelists. I wanted to say thank you once again to Hervé, Lamis, Vijay, and Benjamin. Thank you so much for your time, for a bit more than I'd originally requested. On behalf of Read Exhibitions and our speakers, thank you to everyone who was able to attend today. Stay safe, everyone. Goodbye, and I hope you will all be able to join us at our next webinar. Thank you.